My name is Rachel Wilkins. I am the co-founder of the Good News Show, TIMEPieces, which is Time's Web3 initiative, community council member, and delighted to actually have a conversation today about Ordinals. I guess everybody here, you've just come off stage, right, Matt? So
yeah, you know.
Everybody knows who Matt is, right? But let's do a quick round of intros.
Sure. Matt Medved, co-founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief of Now Media. You know us for NFT Now, our digital art fair, The Gateway, and Sovereignty, our tech side.
My name is Erik, and I'm the product director at RuneStacks.
And I'm Landy Slatteery, and my day job is creative innovation director at Channel 4 in the UK, and also founder of a new project with the New York City street artists that's going to be coming into Ordinals.
And joining us last minute.
Sorry about that. I'm Nick Calabro, CEO of Glitter.fi. We are building an infrastructure for entirely pure Bitcoin primitive, Bitcoin native smart contracts, all existing directly within OpReturn, all facilitated through Bitcoin transactions. Very exciting stuff. Bitcoin is the execution layer.
I like it. So I think originally when we talked about what this panel was going to be about, we talked about how NFTs are dead. That was a big statement. It was actually a statement that Bobby Hundreds made a couple of years ago as well. But NFTs are dead, but why Ordinals are the future? So perhaps just each of you could give your take on what it is particularly about Ordinals that you're excited about, and maybe just some things that you're seeing in the ecosystem that you think kind of respond to, why Ordinals are really the way to move forward.
I'll kick us off here. Yeah, Ordinals are very special, very unique. I mean, I think everyone here pretty much will share that sentiment. Even when NFTs are dying, Ordinals are the only one that are truly, literally existing on the chain at all times. This is kind of just like the basic understanding of how Ordinals exist within a Bitcoin node at all times. Really, I think the magic that Ordinals accomplished was nobody was ever looking at a full Bitcoin node on their desk and saying, I have every single Satoshi right there, very clearly tracked, very obviously in a certain place. We have these interesting now mechanisms where you can put an image on it. No one ever thought to use the chain in a way other than simply the ledger that we kind of like the primary use case of Bitcoin. So that to me, like that was like really the paradigm shift. I do think that Casey is a data hoarder. And it's interesting because when you think about Bitcoin, it literally is just data. And someone finally said, what can we do with this data other than just simply using it as a massive chain and a consensus? So these like interesting angles that really shifted what Bitcoin can be used for. It's even how we created Glitter, because it was essentially, well, this is Bitcoin is a layer in and of itself that has other capabilities. How do we push those to the limits?
To you, Matt, you founded a company literally called NFT Now, right? Like you were very much a pioneer in terms of media and storytelling around the bullish market that we had in 2021 for NFTs, which really saw artists go from just minting on chain to all the way up to Sotheby's and Christie's and auction houses. Do you think that we're seeing that moment right now with Ordinals?
It's very interesting. One of the things that I've been saying is that I spoke at Ordinals Asia, I spoke at Ordinals Lisbon, and I remember tweeting about it like this feels like early 2021, like late 2020, like NFT energy. A lot of people who are building, a lot of people who are excited, a lot of artists coming together, meeting for the first time. Like the URL to IRL thing, and I love it. Obviously, I don't we haven't necessarily seen like a sea change or like a massive spike in volume in that way yet, like to compare with 2021. But I do think that there is like a real movement happening. And so one thing that's interesting is, as we kind of built out, it started with NFT Now, we built, out to Now Media. We're going to talk a little bit more about it later, but we're about to launch BTC Now, which is catering to culture on Bitcoin. Because I think the current media landscape is like very focused on the financial side, the markets, like the pricing, which is great. That's hugely important. It's a massively important financial instrument. But what interests me is the culture, the builders, the artists on chain. And so I'm really bullish on it. I think it's really exciting. One thing that like I think kind of like clicked for me is, you know, I remember. So we had a show called a Twitter space called Not Financial Advice that Trevor Owens, the founder of Ninja Alerts, hosted and still hosts. But I remember he came to me in like February of 2023, like wild-eyed, being like, "Oh my God, like Ordinals, like and I was just like, you remind me of me when I discovered NFTs, like, you know, like this just this excitement, this this energy." And I was like, yeah, dude, like turn Not Financial Advice into an Ordinal show. And then I connected him with Leonidas, and the rest is history there. But it was really cool because like I remember my I'll never forget this, like my our social media manager was like very young, like straight, like 18, like he chose to work at NFT Now versus like going to college. And so his entry point into crypto was Ethereum to buy NFTs, you know? And so he had never, like Bitcoin was never really relevant to him. Like he didn't really like, he was like, oh yeah, he's like this young kid. He's like, I didn't really know about it, whatever. And then all of a sudden with Ordinals, he was like, wait, like I want to learn more about Bitcoin. And I was like, that is something that's really significant because so many people came into crypto from the artist community, from the creative community for NFTs. And largely that was happening on Ethereum. Obviously, now there's a lot of activity on Solana and these other chains too, but like Bitcoin was kind of like, you know, for a lot of these people, it wasn't necessarily a part of their experience. And as somebody who came into Web3 and crypto through Bitcoin, it made me really happy to see this like younger generation kind of like discovering Bitcoin all anew, and also like a new contingent, more of a creative community. So I think Ordinals, I'm very bullish on the space. I think like there's always going to be like the ups and downs of market cycles, but I think it makes a lot of sense, especially for like digital art and like, you know, really high end like inscriptions there. And so I think like there's a lot of people I think are doing a great job there. And so you know, it's a space that we plan to double down on.
That might be breaking news. Did we just get the scoop on BTC Now? Oh my goodness.
We've teased it before,
Okay, fine.
but
Well, we didn't get the scoop.
It, but
we didn't get the scoop.
Yeah, the scoop. No, you got a little bit more than anybody else has so
Okay.
far.
So I'm going to throw it to Landy, and then we'll come back to you. But so Landy, your day job, you are creative innovation director for Channel 4, which is one of the biggest broadcasters in the United Kingdom. But you've been in the space, in and around the space, lurking. Can we say lurking?
Yeah.
Learning and lurking for 3 years. You're 3 or 4 years. You're an OG. Working with the New York City street artist Goldlocks, bringing her from the block to the blockchain, which I just love that line. That's perfect. But talk to us about why you are thinking about Ordinals right now in terms of preservation and provenance for the street artist.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, I come from a very different angle from this. So I work in a creative agency in London, and my job is to kind of sort of help a company like a content broadcast company like that's pivoting to be purely a streaming platform figure out how it may distribute and create content, you know, around tokenization and all of that. So, and you know, and with AI and with all sorts of things. So my mindset is always like, you know, sort of like looking for the next thing, and you know, obviously I've got like a passion for that. And then in 21 I fell into, you know, the Clubhouse kind of, you know, spring of 21 set where we just and actually went through that really kind of, you know, high energy sort of bull run feeling where people were purchasing digital assets, and there was a real excitement in the air, and people were genuinely incredibly attached and excited to these like, you know, reveal moments, and I got that feeling of what it feels like to just absolutely love like a little tiny digital wizard or something, like literally like you love it like with all your heart, you know. And I just found that fascinating, and I really do think that we are moving into a new era with creators that is going to be like a new. Well, people talk about a creator economy, but I really do believe that tokenization of kind of creativity and creators' ability to to wrap commerce around their content is going to be just the new wave. You know, it's going to be a whole new way. So I think like we're on the brink of something that we haven't quite seen yet. Like it hasn't quite stuck yet. And in terms of Ordinals, I work with Goldlocks. The two of us we're creative partners together. We were art college kids in the rave scene first time round, and then ended up like being creative partners and working for lots of brands, and come back together on this project because the idea as well of art on chain, but really, really on chain is something that like we find really, really exciting. So with Ordinals, like we inscribed our first Ordinal. I bought a Bitcoin puppet right at the beginning. Like it's, I mean,
Congratulations.
yeah, I know. I mean, I could see that and I could feel that energy like straight away with Ordinals, and I was just like, this is so exciting. And for us now, really, just as artists and as a creative team, resolution is just an issue for us. Like we've got some really high-end art, and actually trying to get that to look the way we want it to look, properly inscribed, you know. And I know a lot of people do a bounce to a higher res file, but we don't really find that acceptable either. So, you know, so we're probably going to have to raise capital to have, which, you know, we're going to do on other chains to get the money to be able to mint the highest res, really, really absolutely spot on art on Ordinals. Yeah, I find it really exciting.
Erik, where does Runes tap into this conversation?
That's a good question. After Ordinals, I think the same reason that you would apply to why I would choose an Ordinal over another NFT, I think applies to fungible tokens. So in my opinion, like I said in the earlier panel, Bitcoin is forever. We have the highest decentralization, we have the highest security, and there's just no way that something like IPFS could get in the way of NFTs on Bitcoin. Above that, I love that Casey Ruderman went with the name Ordinals, because we're all about the subjective value of things. It's not just about cardinals. And that's where Runes comes into play too. I see that Ordinals is people-driven and value-driven, and that's the same to fungible tokens, who might not have like images to look at, but it's all about how you're part of the community. I mean, you just mentioned Bitcoin puppets, and of course there's a Pups World Peace Bitcoin rune. And I think Pups bridge from Solana to Bitcoin runes as an example to show that this is the direction where it goes. We just saw that too with Magic Internet Money and Wizard and BRC20. And even though the runes and Ordinals market is down right now, the activity just starts to pick up around these major communities, because I believe instead of citadels on Earth and buying land and all that stuff, we Bitcoiners have been talking for some time now, like it's going to be in cyberspace. You are choosing to be part of the Bitcoin puppet community by owning a Bitcoin puppet. You choose to be part of it by owning Pups. You choose to be a wizard by owning a wizard. And you just make it, it's part of your identity. And at RuneStacks, our idea or vision is we provide the tools for these communities so they and every user of ours can become a master of the universe of Bitcoin memes.
I'm probably going to upset some Bitcoin maxis when I say this, but do we feel there's the consensus that a lot of what we're seeing at the developer level is mirroring kind of the journey that the ecosystem took? And to that point, just last week we saw Zora make a big pivot from an art marketplace to tokenizing content. Do you see, and this is kind of to both you, Matt, as a media company, and to you, with Runes, do you see perhaps that coming to this ecosystem too?
Which specifically coming?
So specifically tokenizing, putting tokens next to content. So like artists dropping, Runes, fungible tokens, and kind of those two things playing together in the sandbox.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think look, it's obviously there's the protocols are different, right? There's like some different tech there, but I think that like tokenized culture, like on-chain culture, it kind of transcends, these different chains, different things. Obviously, but Bitcoin has its own community, it has its own culture, it has its own, developers and founders and projects on it. which I think is really cool. It's one of the reasons why, with what we're doing, sovereignty is like our on-chain media tool suite. We're currently, if you go to nftnow.com, you'll see all of our articles are minted on-chain on Base. And we're actually planning to expand that to Bitcoin. We're going to work with the Ordinals bot team to do that, especially for the BTC Now stuff. And I think that it's about proof of provenance, right? And especially in a time where there's prevalent misinformation and AI. It's tough to tell what's true anymore, and to be able to tell that, hey, this was minted from this source in the form that it appears to be, is really valuable. And that's something that we want to bring to Bitcoin because we recognize the community there. And so I think that. So to answer your question, I do think that we're going to see some similar trends, but I also think that Bitcoin is its own ecosystem. It has its own culture, and it's not going to necessarily track the exact same way because there's just other dynamics at play, right? Obviously the rise of Ethereum NFT projects, especially the community-based PFP projects, a lot of that was driven by royalties, which are no longer really a revenue stream that those projects can rely on. So obviously that's not necessarily going to mirror on Bitcoin, but I do think that we're going to continue to see, you talked about memes and meme culture. I always say, don't bet against the power of memes and don't bet against the power of people having fun together. And it seems like that those things the Bitcoin community has been having fun together longer than any other blockchain, and the earliest memes on chain are on Bitcoin, right? You look at Counterparty and the rare Pepes and the like. So I do think we're going to see it's not, like I said, it's not going to mirror it, but there's going to be some things like history rhymes, right?
I feel that every year that we attend, these conferences, the layers of friction are being removed, but there are still some significant barriers to entry. I just had the pleasure of chatting with your co-founder Perry about how you're empowering devs to come and build dApps on BTC. What is kind of what's exciting to you in terms of removing those layers of friction, and what kind of dApps are you really hoping to see?
So, really, this is I was orange-pilled pretty heavily back in 2017, and ever since then, I wanted to do something with the Bitcoin, right? This is the major, big problem that everyone just faces. They're all right, this is great, it's a great store of value, but it's kind of like a rock. What am I supposed to do with it? And it really is. I would always compare it, if you're working on Ethereum as an Ethereum dApp developer versus a Bitcoin developer, one of them is almost in a high rise with a coffee machine and everything's really nice. The Bitcoiners come home from work and they're sweaty. They're full of, they were literally in the mines. And this is commensurate with the development process because one of them is literally built for it to be built on. The other one is simply not, right? So we're building out these Rube Goldberg machines and everything like this to make Bitcoin kind of squeeze into this world where it can have some sort of trustless execution behavior. But it's really, really hard, right? And it's it's kind of going against gravity in that way. I like to think of those working at Bitcoin are kind of like modern-day astronauts. Maybe a little bit of a crazy analogy, but it really is that same type of new frontier in a way. Very mysterious, very just difficult to work within, and it is it's almost thankless in a way as well, because you wonder why take the harder route. Well, because you have these concessions that you don't want to give up on, the trustlessness, the decentralization. So with all that, once we're able to have, you kind of said it before, all the different things that we're going to be borrowing from ETH, since ETH made it easy to go from 0 to 100 on all these different ideas, everything is pretty much going to be seeming like it's being borrowed from ETH. My favorite one is I want an Aave on Bitcoin. I want a MakerDAO on Bitcoin. I want all these really essential, simple DeFi tools that allow you to simply access your Bitcoin liquidity in a way that does not have to rely on a chain that you don't want to build upon because it has other concessions that you don't want to deal with. And removing those layers of friction for developers is definitely one of the hardest things that we're working on right now. And again, because it's literally not built for it, so someone has to come in, remove those layers in a tangible way, and in a way that creates an experience for developers to not get frustrated, to have them actually excel in this ecosystem. So yeah, I'm just my favorite, I'm definitely bullish, and I am just really, really excited to borrow some trustless, decentralized stablecoin against my Bitcoin without having to do any nonsense, go through trust. Yes, exactly.
So this time last week, or about 10 days ago, I was chairing a panel in Paris at NFT Paris and talking with Mondor Amir, who has just been an incredible collector in the space. And he said something that really stuck with me. He's like, we need to move away from like just using the tech for tech's sake. Like we need to be really intentional about why we use these tools that we have, particularly when it comes to blockchain. And I want to bring it to you, Landy, because this idea of taking street art, something that is always temporary, always in flux, often painted over, and bringing it into this state of permanence, and why Ordinals, like why that is something that you feel pretty strongly about, kind of in terms of that preservation, and then just being a pillar for accessibility for perhaps other street artists who are also dealing with that impermanence to bring something more permanent and lasting on chain. Like, talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the really interesting rub between the two things. On the one hand, like street art is really synonymous with Web3 because it is permissionless. It is peer-to-peer. You walk down the street, like there's no gallery saying, we're open only from like 5 to 10 to 5 or whatever like that. And if something resonates with you and you just look up the tag and you get to see what that is, then that's about just a connection that is just, very much around the whole conversation that Goldlocks comes along with, which is just right, which is that little logo up there, which is basically she always holds the world's just right. And it's about the scientific term for the Goldilocks zone, which is the perfect distance from the sun, so that we're sort of hurtling through space at 67,000 miles an hour, locked at the exact right distance from the sun, like not too hot, not too cold. And, in our days, we can just be running around like thinking that we need more, or, stressing about that small thing that we've got to do or whatever. So this whole thing is about just, letting everyone just have a little bit of a stop and kind of realize, what's just being present in the moment of just, how amazing it actually is that we're here all together. So you've got that side of sort of street art, which works really, really well. But then you've also got this whole thing about like, it's just always a letting go. So like Goldlocks, like hand paints these like wheat pastes of this like little girl and these bears. And she puts them up on the streets at night and, lovingly hand paints them and then puts them up and never knows if they're going to be like just ripped off or painted over the next day, or sometimes they're there for a long, long time. Sometimes there's a little foot just poking out for years. It's really lovely. And then to move from that to be to the most permanent thing that you could possibly do, which is to inscribe your work on the mother chain, to us is like that rub between those two things of the impermanent and the permanent, I think is just a really super exciting. And even the graffiti wall that we had at the Nolcha show the other night, which everyone was painted on, and we've got here as well, is a sort of an exercise in that too, right? Because like everybody just pastes, you can do a little wheat paste and just paste over someone else's work. So it's about that letting go as well.
When you think of Ethereum, moments in time, kind of historic moments that maybe really moved the needle and brought the attention economy with it, obviously you can't not mention Beeple's Everydays. Have we had that moment for Ordinals yet? Do you see anybody on the radar that could be that moment? And do we need it?
I don't think we've had that moment yet. I think that like, if you think about what that moment was, it made NFTs a household name. It brought it to the biggest publications. Like, it made the traditional art world take the space seriously for the very first time. It was an absolute like sea change, right? What's interesting is like we may have just seen a moment like that with the Trump meme coin on that just happened in terms of the meme coin space, like something
biggest onboarding event.
That's right, exactly. For better and for worse, right? But I do not think that we've seen anything like that for the ordinal space. I still think that like most people don't know what an ordinal is. I think a lot of people, even in crypto, may not even like fully know that there's like art on Bitcoin and all of that. So no, I don't think we've seen that moment. But it'd be really interesting to think about what that could be in the space, and whether that's someone you know, I always say like these spaces are driven for better for worse by big sales and big launches and big things. And obviously, like when you look at Beeple, $69 million, nobody in the traditional art world could ignore that anymore, right? It was easy for them to write off NFTs and digital and like on-chain art before that. After that, they had to pay attention. You know, with the Trump meme coin launch, like just the level, just how big it was, and obviously the timing of it, and you know the incoming president of the United States, every single major media outlet covered it, right? Like that broke through the our own bubble, and it reached the mainstream. So I.
Do you rank the Sotheby's auctions, right? Because those are like pretty prominent, like on shrooms and things like that.
Yeah, but like those are nice steps forward for the Ordinals ecosystem. But like most, yeah, like most people in the art world don't even know about those, you know, like let alone people outside the art world. Whereas like Beeple and the $69 million NFT sale was on like all the late night shows. It was on like every single like major outlet and newspaper. Like it was beyond even just the art world.
Cover of Time magazine.
Cover of Time, you know, like so it was a cross-cutting cultural moment to the mainstream. But it has been nice to see, you know, Sotheby's and Christie's do some stuff with Ordinals projects. You know, I think Christie's did something with OMB. That's great. These are steps forward, but I don't think we've had the Beeple moment.
Do we just need to stop using the word NFT to because we've had kind of a PR crisis around that?
There's a reason why we use Now Media, you know, like we well we have optionality around it, because to be honest, like I think there's like I obviously the term NFTs become very polarizing. I also think it's like not going to go away anytime soon. I think that like even if let's say in 3 months, 6 months, it rotates, the liquidity rotates back to there, all of a sudden it's making headlines again, the major media publications are going to call it an NFT again. NFTs are going to be what people talk about, for better or for worse. But to me, like again, I think that like the terms like that really distract away from like what's really important, which is the technology. At the end of the day, like we talk about NFTs as though they're a category. They're not a category. They're a medium that transcends every category, right? And as we continue to like move forward in that, and as these like markets continue to develop in their own way, I think we're not going to talk about like, oh, are NFTs up or down, or like what's going. We're going to be like, oh, like digital art, on-chain digital art is doing its thing. This is what's happening in like real-world assets. Like here's this thing, here's that thing. Yeah, you have the community like PFP projects and such, but like a lot of these things have very different consumer and creative priorities. It's just that it was so early and they were all under this like new banner that we kind of lumped them all together.
I think often about the line that Keith Grossman shared, who's now president of MoonPay, about how, you know, we've not yet had the 10,000 songs in your pocket moment for this technology. We're still talking about the, you know, the rails and all these different things. Until a consumer can really understand those benefits at that level, we've got a lot of work to do. What are you most excited about in terms of the work that you're doing at Runes?
To answer that, I have to pick up at where you talked about maxis. I think maximalism theoretically is exactly what I am doing by pursuing runes and ordinals on Bitcoin, and also bridging into other chains and like thinking about these things, because not only need I liquidity to make my product successful, it is the way that we drive hyper-Bitcoinization forward. And to me, that is the Bitcoin maximalist thing. Like, I mean, I was laser eyes. I have been hodling for years, and there's a point in time that you need to understand that this narrative just doesn't reach out to all other people. So you need to reach these people where they're at. And that's what we're doing with runes. That's what we have been doing with ordinals. And that's how we will drive the space forward, by introducing new products that allow us to build a parallel economy to Wall Street, Solana, Ethereum, and co.
Can you expand on that a little bit more granularly? You say that that's what you're doing. Like, how are you doing that? Like, how do we bring... Because I'll be honest, this is actually the very first Ordinals event I've ever been to, let alone chaired a panel on the topic. Thanks. I feel like I'm getting red pilled as I'm doing this.
Orange pilled.
Orange pilled. That's right. That's right. Like, how... As somebody who's been building in this ecosystem, you know, I'm very much been in ETH and Base and Layer 2 stuff, but I am very curious about this ecosystem. But what is being done by those building here to bridge that, you know, and bring people over?
Yeah, I mean, RuneStocks itself, we introduced fully functional and seamless swaps on Layer 1 in Bitcoin. So that is innovative, because Bitcoin is UTXO based, and for example, to sell a chunk of your runes, you would have to pre-split them, and a lot of things, like you mentioned, is pretty clunky still. And with rune stacks, we're removing this clunkiness by providing the swaps for, like, you can buy one dog if you wanted to, and you're able to provide that liquidity, and you're able to yield on it, and this is technically challenging, but a simple way right now that we can introduce these things, these kind of things on Bitcoin. And we're, for example, working with Nick and Glitterify to, for example, bring more of the Ethereum DeFi functionality and combine it with the Bitcoin security, and expand the product offering. And Bitcoin is a black hole that sucks up all value around it, and it will only do so when we allow it. And so we need to open the door. And by developing these products on Bitcoin, we invite people who are already in some ecosystem like Ethereum and Solana to partake in Bitcoin, and we allow for the new investors and new retail and new users to come into the space and just like trade away without this forceful, painful education part that Bitcoin maxis have been trying to push on the crowd. Like, oh no, you don't need that, you don't want to do that, you don't want to do these things. But human nature is human nature, and that's why we build community-centric tools. We're listening to the community.
I love that. Landy, you you have shared a funny story with me. You have been at Channel 4, you have this huge job, at Channel 4. You took a sabbatical, but were invited back, and this major broadcast entity had created a role for you specifically to explore new technology. Like you're in the room with the Amazons, the Microsofts, talking about how Channel 4 can adopt this new technology. Like, talk to us about, first of all, that role, and is BTC or any of the the protocols that are being built on BTC even a part of the conversation with some of these institutions yet?
No, it's not actually, which
We
is
are early.
Yes, yeah, which is so interesting. So so my day job has me talking with people at the top of their game at Google and Apple and Meta, and like building things with them and seeing how where we can be innovative in terms of content and content marketing and all of that. So I've got all of that kind of like real world kind of sort of conversations going on, and quite a lot of it doesn't cross into this at all, but some of it does. And I think also the whole conversation around sort of monetization of content, I think is just I think there is a little bit of fingers in ears going on in that world. Honestly, I think they're a little bit like the band playing on the side of the Titanic, kind of. But I think people who can make great content and can connect with audiences and actually sort of stand for something, and like Channel 4 is definitely a channel network that does that. So I really believe in this role and being able to sort of help pull them into that future, and being a founder and building what we're doing with Just Right, which is to actually figure out, how you bring great art and a brand that sort of already exists with a beautiful message, that to expand that message not just from the streets of New York City, but just to a global audience. And for me, the sort of maxi this and maxi that stuff doesn't make any sense at all. Like, if you're looking from the outside in and you're thinking, oh wait, things are going to be tokenized, and I can, people are starting to get their heads around the idea of the fact that Web3 is, ownership, and that and what tokenization sort of is. And once that really clicks with people, I just think it's going to happen as the technology arrives for it to be a seamless thing. Like you were sort of saying, is that like to actually, there are some people who really want to push the narrative that there's this huge mountain to climb, and that if you don't understand how to climb that huge mountain, you sort of don't deserve the rewards on the other side, And I just think that, I've also had a whole life of, as a creative director before this role, trying to get people to click on links. It's like, your whole job is to get people to actually click on the thing. And I just think until we're in a safe world where you can actually click through into something and participate, but I do think it's coming. I think that it will be multi-chain. I think that the interoperability between all of the chains should be like hopefully sort of seamless on the back end. And I think there will be a whole new way of creativity and content and commerce kind of merging together. That's what I see, and that's what I'm excited about. And I just have to sort of stay in my own energy, sort of moving forward with that, and just knowing that the people I'm speaking to in the creative industries in London and connected to, you know, the US are interested, but, you know, they're not interested in a lot of the stuff that they're seeing right now, right? So hopefully, you know, Just Right can be like a bit of an onboarder for those people to kind of come in and start to play, you know, in a way that's, yeah.
I think there's a saying where it's something about if you're in a taxi, I'm going to butcher this, but if you're in a taxi and your taxi driver's talking about a stock, it's time to sell that stock. Like, I just had that moment. Is it shoe shiners? Okay, there.
Great Depression. During the Great Depression, or right before the Great Depression, JFK's father, Joseph P. Kennedy, was getting his shoes shined, and the little shoe shiner boy was like, this new stock on the stock market's really great. He turned around and said, we're in a bubble, F this all, and shorted the entire market, and then a month later was the Great Depression. So he made all his money right there.
Well, on that happy note, I actually just onboarded my Uber driver with... onboarded my Uber driver to with a Coinbase wallet and ended up sending her 50 USD, and I got the whole thing on video, and it was like a beautiful moment. Like, are we seeing any of those moments with Ordinals, with BTC, with Runes? Like, are we really, really, really early still? Like, what is it going to take to kind of onboard those masses? And is that even the intent here?
Yeah, I think it's still early. You know, I do think that, like, if there's, you know, if you think about like the narratives that have kind of been the prime drivers of attention and liquidity this cycle, obviously it's been meme coins, a lot of that on the Solana ecosystem, AI and crypto, obviously Ordinals, you know, and the like. But I do think that, like, I don't know how much Ordinals has reached quote unquote retail, you know, just because it's still like, you know, I remember in, you know, Ordinals launched during the bear market, right? February, like that February 23. And I remember it was like, you know, it started off in like spreadsheets and like it was super DIY, and like there's a beauty in that. I think that's amazing. But like, and obviously you saw the guardrails kind of built in real time, but it's still not easy to like access, like to buy. I mean, you know, platforms like Magic Eden made it easier for sure. I remember I was like, you know, doing the mempool stuff for Runes when it launched, like, and obviously there's like a lot. The Runes ecosystem's come a long way, but it's still not like easy for a retail like a person who is not crypto native to like necessarily go from interest to onboard really quickly, right? There's still a lot of friction, still a lot of things you have to learn, and so I think that like if there's anything that's like that's brought retail in, it's unfortunate. For better or for worse, probably for worse has been like the Solana meme coin casino, you know, and you know, just because there's less friction to entry there, but you know, and I actually have been in an Uber where I saw someone was on like deck screener, and I was like, oh, I was like, I know what you're doing there. Right, yeah, exactly.
XRP or Pi.
Exactly. But I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing at this stage. Like, remember, it's like, you think about it, it's like, I mean, Bitcoin has been around for more than a decade, and we only just got the ETFs, right? Like, things take time, right? Which is why, like, you know, I know it's a very short attention economy at times, but like, it's okay to also let these spaces kind of like develop with like the crypto native builders and get it ready for like mass adoption, right? Because right now, I think that if there was something, if let's say Kanye West dropped an Ordinal tomorrow, and like it would be an influx of an interest in, or a rune or something. There would be, I mean, it would be exciting because there'd be an influx of attention stuff. But I don't know that like necessarily those platforms are ready for that yet, right? Like that's like, I think a lot of people might have a tough experience that might turn them off to it. So it may actually be good for the Bitcoin like ecosystem to continue to develop and make things easier and make things a little more streamlined before there is like a mass onboarding type event like that.
Can we talk a little bit about culture in kind of the BTC ecosystem? I think there's like this big pendulum swing, at least from what I've seen as technically an outsider, maybe until today when I'm getting orange pilled. But there's like the extreme of Ordinals, like really, you know, sophisticated art that's being minted on Ordinals. And I love that, the work that Amanda and Danny are doing with On-Chain Monkey, really onboarding high quality, high caliber artists. And then you got the pups and the wizards and all the other stuff that is very lo-fi. We've been in some of the chats.
Don't knock the pups.
Don't knock the pups. But also, if you're in any of those group chats, it is kind of like a 14-year-old club of 14-year-old boys sending dick pics, and not literally, but emojis. But like, what is that culture? Is this a moment to like maybe elevate a little? Does that culture still play a significant role here? Does it alienate media, retail, mass adoption? Like, do we still have work to do, or does it matter? Whoever wants to take that.
I mean, complex question on culture there. I don't know how much of Bitcoin culture translates into the communities. I think like sometimes it's like Bitcoin puppets, for example. They're so chain agnostic, like talking, just like the conversations they have, but they land on Bitcoin because they understand that they have the staying power there, and they're on the mother chain. If you release a collection, you want to be on the king chain. So that makes a lot of sense for me. Like at the same time, you're saying like there's a difference in the styles of art. I mean, that's what art is, right? Like there's a Picasso and there's a Rothko. So I think there are like big differences in this. And fine art is what you think of it. Not everything will appeal to you. Like the Ordinal Maxi Biz, they've just been releasing some stuff, and arguably they are fine art. And even though it's more gritty, it's more like
$6.7 million. Right, the sale?
The Black Eye sale earlier this week, right? Yeah, 6.7 million in this market. It's amazing. Yeah, it's remarkable.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing at RuneStakes too. And barely 2 months since we have been live, we were able to achieve $10 million in volume, over 2,200 users, over 6,000 completed swaps, and that's just since the 7th of January, so not even 2 months. So there is a demand. The community is strong. It's already there, right? It's just how we now invite the rest to this conversation. So, culture transcends chains, I guess.
So, I guess because each of you kind of represent something different on this panel. Obviously, building accessible tools for developers, building a media brand, this kind of fungible token economy, bringing an artist in from kind of impermanence to permanence. If you were to kind of pitch this ecosystem to somebody who's perhaps an outsider or looking to build, their solutions or businesses here, how would you do that? And that's kind of probably going to bring us full circle to the end of our panel. So,
I would say one thing that I always try to hammer home when it comes to Bitcoin and everything that's built on Bitcoin as a result is immutability. So I actually didn't. Of course, like street art gets painted over. I don't know why I never really thought about it, but it feels hardened, right? Like, oh, it's cement and everything. But no, it's like everything is ephemeral, right? And I guess there is art in having something be ephemeral, right? Like Snapchat versus something more like a Rosetta Stone, for example, right? Like just like something that we're going to reference until the end of time. And it's really important and definitely taken for granted a lot, because it's not just a matter of having something. Like news, for example. Ordinals is used for like news, which is like really interesting. You can publish an article and then it is inscribed on the chain forever. And I'm going to trust that news source now because it was never manipulated. You can't go back and rewrite history. You can't roll back the chain. We've been here long enough now where it's going to be mathematically impossible to do so. So yeah, like these little like side angle traits, like yes, we can get like, the cats are pretty, like everything's like really fun, you make money here and there, but like there is like a core mission of immutability, decentralization that is really what I try to lead with, instead of leading with like more fluffy things. The more fluffy things are definitely amazing and very fun and important, but there's like a core mission of like why we're here first and foremost, which I definitely try to hammer home.
Matt?
You repeat the question again, like the...
Yeah, so really how you would pitch this ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, look, Bitcoin is the OG, right? Like Bitcoin set Bitcoin created the blockchain technology as we know it. Like Bitcoin it has the most liquidity, it has the highest market cap, it's a reason why it is the coin that people like newcomers to the space purchase the most, right? It is the driver of crypto markets. And so culture on Bitcoin is a massive prospect that we're like only, I think it's amazing that, you know, and look, like, to be fair, culture on Bitcoin is nothing new. Like it, you know, there's everything with Counterparty and Rare Pepes and everything before that, but being able to actually inscribe on Bitcoin with what Ordinals unlocked is really, really powerful. And now with runes and, you know, that continued development, culture on Bitcoin still feels like, on-chain on Bitcoin still feels really early. And in the same way that like I tell people, you know, whenever I'm trying to bring new people into the space, I'm like always like the first thing you should buy is like own some Bitcoin. You want to own some Bitcoin because, you know, I'm a big believer that like, you know, at this stage, Bitcoin is inevitable, right? It's grown too far. It's been embraced by too many of the major institutions. It's being embraced by you know, sovereign nations and the like. Like, you know, Bitcoin is inevitable, and it's really the driving force that's pushing forward the entire crypto ecosystem. And so I'm also a big believer that culture is what will take crypto mainstream. We saw this to a degree with NFTs on Ethereum in terms of bringing an entire community, the artist community and creators who before weren't that interested in crypto. It crossed the chasm and brought them in. And as a result, the crypto ecosystem developed and became better. You know, like you don't bet against Bitcoin and you don't bet against culture. So like, why would you bet against culture on Bitcoin?
Matt is bullish. Erik?
Definitely bullish. Definitely agree on that. How to pitch? So Runes specific on April 23rd, 2024, when Runes was shortly after Runes was launched, we 80% of all Bitcoin transactions were Runes-related transactions. 3 months after that, we still were at 50% of all transactions, and to this day, we process 20% of all Bitcoin transactions since launch are Runes-related. That's over $1 billion in volume, and it's over $250 million that went to miners. And it also underlines how the Bitcoin ecosystem works perfectly. Like even if you looked at the mempool at that point, and the fees have been skyrocketing, it's always funny to see this, see the maxi scope around the mempool usage. It's like, you know, the mempool regulates itself. We have a difficulty adjustment. Everything works well. The fees will catch up and come down again, you know, every 10 minutes, basically, like clockwork. And yeah, I think yeah, you don't bet against Bitcoin. You don't bet against culture, and it's just it's the biggest thing that's actually happening in crypto.
A third bullish. All right, Landy, bring it home. Bullish on Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, yeah, I definitely am bullish on Bitcoin. Like you said, Matt, it's the OG, it's the mother chain. I think it's like the most, from the moment I read the white paper, you know, I sort of understood blockchain, and, you know, I find it like absolutely fascinating. I think that like when it comes to culture, that if this new world, which I believe it is the internet rebuilding itself again in a new way. And if that is the case, then that is the most spectacular opportunity, but also quite a responsibility. And I think that, you know, the way we build culture is for everyone to sort of stand up and make sure that they do have a compass that they're kind of, you know, working to when they sort of move in this space, because money has a real energy to it, which can, you know, pull things in different directions. And, you know, don't want to go into that too much, but I think if we can all kind of like lead with a sort of an openness and a kindness, and, you know, stand up for what we believe in, then yeah, I think that's what I think.
Wonderful. I don't know how much time we have left. David, do we have any more time? Are we done? Are we taking questions? Does anybody have any questions? How are we doing for time? Oh. What do you guys think? Well, let's ask the question. Is there anything that we've not touched on that's maybe Ordinals, runes, or just general ecosystem that we've not touched on that you think is important that we share?
I kind of wanted to do price targets, but yeah, this is a good prompt as well. I think one thing to keep in mind when it comes to Ordinals, runes, it is unapologetically expensive and slow-fi, right? So one interesting way of looking at it is if you're on Ethereum or any other type of chain that's built like this with a native gas token, if I am doing a transaction on ETH and I see that it's going to cost 35 bucks in ETH in gas, I am a little okay with it because I'm already holding a ton of ETH, right? So I see I'm almost like a little intrinsically biased by paying this, and I know that it's going to continue filling my bags because I am within the ecosystem there. This is opposite in Bitcoin, right? When you're doing any of these transactions, there is somewhere a miner who has to get straight up paid, and then they have to sell that Bitcoin to keep the lights on. You don't get the same circle, loop, infinite loop there to keep the whole thing really, really propped up. So this is why a lot of ordinals, you see that they get kind of like drained a little bit all the time, really, really subtly sometimes, but like it's not number go up technology because electricity costs money is simply what it comes down to. It's a little bit of a, I think it's a beautiful thing. Like, this is the reality of what we're working with, and there are ways around it, and like there's royalties and things like that that we're actually kind of exploring and trying to figure out how to really optimize this a little bit better. But yeah, I think understanding that Bitcoin is just like unapologetically going to try to slap you in the face and be ready for it is like a really important thing before you get into it.
Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we touched on pretty much the most important things. I think, like, for me, like, I'm very fascinated by like medium native culture, and so I think, like, you know, you look at like the ecosystems in like the NFT space that have like really like risen, like CryptoPunks on ETH being like, you know, what they represented, which was like an experiment. You know, they were not financially motivated. They were given away for free, right? Free to claim, and they were an experiment. You know, their founders never envisioned them, you know, becoming what they became. And so it's like, what is like? I think it's just an interesting thing to think about in like the context of like the Bitcoin, like the Ordinals ecosystem. Like, will we look back at some of those early inscriptions, you know, those sub whatever amount, and say, hey, look, like those were people really trying out this technology for the first time. Will we ascribe value to those things? It'll be interesting. You know, some of the top projects like Taproot Wizards and Quantum Cats and the puppets, etc. Like, you know, what do they represent within this like kind of cultural sphere? Because, you know, what we found is like, it's like these cult communities like really are the ones that can kind of like weather the ups and downs of the cycles. We've seen this in the NFT space, we've seen it in meme coins, we've seen it, you know, across the board. And so it's interesting because if you think about it, ordinals are like you know, I know meme coins were big this cycle, but meme coins have existed for quite some time. Like, you know, look back to Doge and all that. But ordinals are really like new kids on the block, relatively speaking. Like, it's really a new community. The projects that we consider OG in ordinals are still very young by other standards, right? And so it's going to be really interesting to see like which ones kind of like stand the test of time, which ones what sort of like, you know, continues to evolve. One thing that I think like one thing that makes a lot of sense to me is like high-end digital art on ordinals. I think is can be really powerful. I love what Asprey Studio has been doing. Ali Walker over there, I think, has been really embracing ordinals for like really like you know, and he's bringing it to a consumer base that like is not crypto native. You know, like I don't know if you guys have been, but like if you go to London, you should go to the Asprey flagship. Right above it is like this completely elegant. We did a little feature on it at NFT Now. There's like this elegant digital art gallery. It's beautiful. And it's like a lot of ordinals on display. It's really cool. And then he's done like the Asprey Bugatti Egg has an ordinal element. What he did with Silver Scream has an ordinal element. And, you know, he's got like Leonardo DiCaprio talking about ordinals, you know, like looking at, and that's crazy. You know, so like I do think it's going to take, you know, it's going to be really interesting to see like which things kind of resonate, which things have staying power, and then having people who continue to like push it forward and bring it to new audiences, I think is really key.
2 follow-ups on that, if I can. I would say the idea of like high caliber art on ordinals, is there not pause there with the idea that you can't have a really high resolution just yet?
I mean,
is that prohibitive to many?
I mean, I think that it's probably something it's something that needs to be thought about. But there have been big inscriptions, right? In fact, people kind of like, people take a lot of pride in the big inscriptions, right?
Which is costly, though.
It's costly,
right?
but it also you can also make the argument that that is the investment that's needed to make it this scarce, high-end, like object of value.
It's like buying the more expensive paint and
Right.
the higher
Yeah.
quality canvas.
Exactly. It's like, this took, like you could argue this is craftsmanship, right? This is whiskey that was, aged in years in barrels, right? It tastes better. It took longer. It required an investment not only in time but in money to produce, and as a result, it's valued higher by the market. I'm not saying it's a perfect analogy, but I don't know that necessarily it's prohibitive. I think it's just something that has to be factored in. And one thing I think is actually really good is that because it actually costs a not insignificant amount to inscribe things, especially things of that size, it means you don't have the like prevalent spam and slop
The
of like
slop.
yeah, exactly, of like that you find on, like I remember when OpenSea implemented Polygon, and all of a sudden I was being sent like a million like BS Polygon NFTs, because there was no cost to do so, and I was like flooding my spam folder. Like that's not going to happen to you on Bitcoin.
And the other follow-up is, if you had to single out one ordinal that you could compare to CryptoPunks that you think would have its moment, what would it be?
Taproot Wizards. I think Taproot Wizards they've like captured the zeitgeist of the culture currently. Obviously quantum, and they're still like out of reach, right? Like you can only really get a quantum cat right now unless they've got the mystique, they've got the like early mover advantage, they got the lore of like that original like 4 megabyte inscription. What Udi has done to like galvanize that community and also like really irritate the maxi community. I think like they're the clear favorite to be like the CryptoPunks of Ordinals. And I, for full disclosure, I do own a quantum cat, so.
I'm going with Bitcoin puppets.
Fair enough.
I guess as well, just and I know we're kind of bouncing all over the place here, but also the idea of some collections choosing to bridge. Like there's been, we've seen collections bridge from ETH to L2 to base, just to kind of avoid those costly gas fees. But how do you feel about mainnet ETH projects coming over to Ordinals, and will we see more of that?
I kind of mentioned it earlier. To me, I appreciate the whole DeFi movement, and I love it. And I think, just aligned with Bitcoin's zeitgeist, which is like move slow, break nothing, because it's going to be the fundamental layer of the future of human society. And so we cannot afford mistakes on that. Which is why it is and how it has been conceived like it is. And I want to add there the maxi part that I think is still true, that is nothing worth doing and nothing worth having is ever free. So like this costliness of Bitcoin is a feature, and it's very important. Just like it's a feature to have 1 megabyte blocks that enable right now, of course, like 4 megabyte maximum size transactions. But like Matt said, so right, people take pride in it. Like my friend Tommy, the Bitcoin War Bonds artist, like he inscribed, I think, the 5th ever 4 megabyte art piece, and he paid $20,000 for it, and until this day, he's so happy with this decision. So yeah, and every time somebody inscribes actually such a big file, it's a whole fest and spiel on Bitcoin Twitter. So, and other than that, I have to say, that the filtering that you mentioned is really true. To me, Ordinals opened something up like the Library of Alexandria, right? But it's not just restricted to papyrus or something. Ordinals is a map that you put onto the Bitcoin blockchain, and you're able to find all these treasures. And no matter what, it's art, it's blueprints to how to print your gun, it's poetry, it's history. So not everything is art, but everything that's being inscribed for this cost is probably important to someone.
Landy, anything that we didn't cover that you want to just circle on?
I just think that a lot of the activity is going to be precious in the future because, I think it's such early days that even when, you've been watching, I've been watching the Ordinals scene and kind of been in it, sort of on the sidelines for a bit. It can feel like, it already feels like 100 years, but it really isn't. And also, some of the things that we don't think are precious then might become precious, because I'm still banking on my Super Yeti. I don't know if anyone else has.
I am also a Yeti holder.
you know, and it's just, there are some moments in time where you just think, actually, were you actually there if you don't have one of these, you know? And it's just, I think that those will have their cultural moments, and I think that there will be similar on Ordinals to that.
There needs to be like a Yeti airdrop, you know, one of these days.
we need
right?
to, we need to fire,
John-
we
John
need to fire
Nuff.
that back up, Matt.
Yeah, let's get it going. Bridge them to Ordinals, do something with them.
Or drop a Yeti coin on runes or something. There we go. Heard it here first. DYOR NFA. All right. Well, I think why Ordinals are the new NFTs. I think we can wrap it there. So thank you all. I appreciate it. Officially orange
Thank you.
pilled.
Thank you. Thank you,
welcome,
Rachel.
welcome.
Thank you guys so much.